All right. We are at the end of Boss Librarian PD, and I saved the very best for last. Joining us today is the 2023 School Librarian of the Year for School Library Journal, Julie Stivers, and TikTok star Ashley Hawkins. And they're going to give a presentation today on centering students in manga and anime programming. We all know that anime and manga is just exploded in the K-12 arena. And these ladies are experts in this area. So I want you to pay close attention, and I want you to enjoy this presentation. So Ashley, I'm going to give you the controls, and I'm gonna wait until I see your screen, and then once I see your screen, go for it.
Okay.
And I love your backdrops, ladies, man. Especially I have a cat tree in my room too, honey.
It's falling apart, but they're rough on it.
They still
Let's
love
see.
it. Yeah.
See, okay.
All right, I see your screen.
All right, and let's present. Okay, there we go. All right, so Julie and I are here to talk to you about centering your students in anime and manga programming. I am going to just come out and say we're not going to talk too much about titles, because yesterday Sarah gave you a bunch of great titles. We do have some title lists of anime and manga that are on our resource list, which we will drop at the end, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are actually here to talk about programming and how to actually use the power of anime and manga to tap into your students' passions. So we're going to just jump into it, and we're going to first start by talking about the link between anime and manga and student engagement. We're going to talk to you about how student voice is key and what we do in our programs. So the link between anime and manga and student engagement. I'm going fast because we don't have much time. And this thing that I've got in front of you is something that I'm not actually going to go too deep into, but it's something that I learned while I was in Japan recently. There's actually, this is something you can actually put in front of reluctant teachers, and point out that in Japan, there is an entire movement for educational manga. And it is all about aligning manga that is not written for educational purposes. So things like Blue Period, a bunch of really wonderful, beautiful manga, and also titles that we would recognize as educational comics here in the States, putting them and saying, these are titles that were made for entertainment, but they are actually really wonderful to learn from. And I have the link to it. You can put it through a translator if you do not know Japanese, and you'll kind of assimilate the information. It's really wonderful. You can see the titles, you can see the covers. It's really great. And you can use it however you need to. But manga is not just for fun. It does have educational purposes, but it doesn't mean it has to be boring.
Hey, first I want to thank you all for sharing space with us. It's the end of the day, and we're just really happy you're here. And of course, thank you to Casey for creating this space for all of us to be here. I just saw a question about our presentation link. We have a lot of student pictures in our slide deck, so we're not going to share the slide deck, but at the end, we'll give a bit.ly to resources that has anything that we mention, it's there. So I think the resource page will fill all of your needs that way. Okay, we're talking about manga and student engagement, and I know there's a lot on this slide. And I kind of did that on purpose because there's a lot related to manga and our students. I'm going to start in that bottom right-hand corner. So as librarians, we know that manga can be an intense interest for so many of our students. And I want you to think about your students that are kind of your biggest manga readers or your biggest anime fans. Anecdotally, many of them are our most vulnerable students. They're the member of one or more beautiful marginalized community. That's not to say that any community is a monolith, But definitely Ashley and I, and our experience, and I think a lot of you would probably agree with us, we do see a lot of overlap. So collecting manga is 100% an equity issue for our spaces. And to demonstrate both sides of that, the intense interest and the beautiful communities, I'm going to start in the upper left-hand corner. This was a remote club that I was running, and I asked my students what their pronouns were, and you can just see by the answers here and the percentages, the beautiful diversity that was present in that club. Below that are some student quotes, because student voice should always ground us in this work. I'll read them really fast. I don't know how to describe it, but manga just gets me in a way that other books don't. When the anime character defeats the villain against all odds, it makes me feel like I've just won too. And it's a lot easier for me to tell characters' emotions in manga and anime than in other media. I don't have to feel like I don't get it. Wow. Okay, so the top upper right-hand corner, this is a throwback nostalgia, a Google Classroom link. Intense is like even too soft a word sometimes. This was a specific, I had a whole club just for Haikyuu, which is a volleyball manga and anime that I also happen to love. But my students were so into it, and it was students across our district. They wanted homework. So in that upper right-hand corner, I do digital identity quilts with students. We did a digital like Haikyuu identity quilt. And that was one of the submissions for that work. They wanted work to do because it was so fun for them. And then I presented on manga and anime before with students. And so with a group of 6 co-presenters, these are some of the marginalized identities that were present in just those 6 people, kind of driving home the point that I made in the beginning, that collecting manga is an equity issue. If we want an inclusive library, we have to have a big manga collection.
And sorry, I am now one-handed, thanks to Kimchi. Student voice is key. This is something that is super important to both of us. It's probably it's a driver in both of our praxis. So, Kimchi, you're not helping. Yeah, go. Okay, so we adhere to something that is called radical student centering. I think we coined it. And it's the idea that we center our students in everything we do. And this is going to be interesting for me because I am talking about my previous library because I am about to move to elementary. So I am currently in the middle of percolating on how this is going to change. So let me just talk though about what I have experienced. And first off, I have always consulted my students on purchase lists, and I believe we both do the same thing. For me, I always have 2 manga readers and 2 fiction readers look over my purchase list, just to make sure I haven't missed anything, just to make sure I'm not being biased in terms of, I tend to have certain things that I really like to read. Even in manga, I have my own biases, and I just try to make sure that I am not leaving all the shonen battle manga out, and I am making sure that it's not all the fluffy romance and all the, it's not, I want balance. I want to make sure that everybody's feeling represented. I also make sure that anime club activities are done by a vote conducted by students. So what we always did was we would vote on whether we viewed shows, play anime adjacent video games, or do something else, like some sort of craft activity. Sometimes there'd be multiple things happening at the same time. Sometimes there would be a video game going on here, there would be kids watching an anime here, and there would be kids doing origami or some other type of activity here, and multiple things happening at very different levels. And then students are always allowed to call us in for backup with adults. If a teacher does not permit a student to use any book for independent reading, students know that they can call us in for a teacher consultation. I had my teachers pretty wrangled by the time I decided to transition to a different place, where this did not happen anymore, because they knew that, well, they know I'm the manga librarian and they were tired of fighting with me. So they just stopped having those fights with their students because they knew that they'd have to argue with me. So I guess that kind of had a thing. And I would come over to them with the lizard on my shoulder and everything and just be the weirdest anime person they could ever encounter. And nobody wanted to have that argument. So I just made it as uncomfortable as possible and just pushed back. And eventually we got rid of it. And I hope it stays that way. And we'll see how it goes. In my next place, I might have to train some new teachers, but I'm hoping that attitudes have evolved. But if they need backup, they need backup. That's what we're here for. Why do I keep doing that?
Okay, some more radical student centering. And when we say that, we don't mean that we think we're the only ones that do it. We just want it to be radical in the sense that it is 100%. Another way that I talk about it is being unapologetically student-centered. I am always going to care about the next student that comes in the library more than like a teacher's printing problem. And you know what? Sometimes maybe that isn't going to make me the most popular person with adults, but I'm unapologetically student-centered and I don't care because my number one stakeholder is my students. And I know that there might be some librarians out there that disagree with that. And I know that collaborating with teachers and supporting teachers is important. I'm not saying it isn't, but for me, the priority is always students. Radical doesn't mean complex, right? The best way to get student perspective on which manga titles to buy is to listen. And we can do this in really macro ways. I do a survey at the beginning of the year, most of us probably do, called Fandom and Interest. And I'll talk in a second about why I name it that. But then micro ways, like there is nothing that helps me build an inclusive collection more than like really nurturing bespoke readers advisory with students and finding out what they like, what they want, and what's missing in my collection. And certainly for manga, students are going to let us know if they know that we are a listening ear. I call my survey Fandoms and Interest Survey instead of a reading survey because I never want my students to think that my interest in them rests on whether or not they read or identify as readers. I think that's so important. I'm just going to pause for a second. I've always felt this way, but it wasn't until recently that I like put it in those words for myself. I am not interested in my students because they read, right? I'm interested in my students because they're my students and they're like full, amazing people. And so this is a picture of one of my students playing Pokemon, which is an extremely literacy rich activity that a student might not think is reading. We know it's reading, but it doesn't matter if they identify as a reader yet, or if they read a lot yet, for me to be extremely interested in supporting them and nurturing whatever they're interested in. I think that's all I had for that slide.
I was just basking in that.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what we do in our programs. Here are some activity ideas. First off, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about this anime and manga journaling, which, by the way, is actually an activity that has really popped off on TikTok and YouTube. And I have some YouTube videos that are really beautiful in the resource list, and I highly recommend watching them. I am actually a big fan of like just journaling and crafting in general, and a lot of kids who are into anime and manga are into this very aesthetic type crafting as well. And so this just was an instant click of like, oh, this is how we can get in deep. You can also do Socratic seminars and circles. You can have open discussions, and you can have a lot of fun surfing through anime DIY, manga DIY on TikTok, and just finding like all these little cool crafty things that I am not really creative at figuring out what to do. I am very good at following directions. That's just a me thing. Like I like to build Gunpla because it tells me exactly, Gunpla are robots. We won't get into that, but basically I like instructions. So if somebody can tell me instructions, I can do them, but I'm not great at figuring out how to do things. But if I can see things, I can take them from other people, and I can be creative within certain confines. I also have just these great things from my students of like reasons to love manga and graphic novels. Let me see, because it might be a little hard to read. But just things like allows you to escape the stress of reality. And other people really loved that and said what this quote said. Why do graphics manga catch your interest more than normal books? Pictures are fun and give more detail. They don't, it's equal and just in different ways. You can have like a lot of great discussions with students on these topics. And here are some spreads of manga and anime journaling. It's just a way to like, because people are now consuming so much anime and manga, they actually do journaling the way that some people journal about books. And it's like an in-depth look of like, this is how I feel about characters. This is how I feel about the episode that I watched. And it's a lot of like emotional processing. So it's something that I started to implement into my clubs, and it can be done at all levels. And you just let kids process what it is they're viewing or reading or consuming. You can do it with also other parts of media, video games, Pokemon cards, anything that they're involved with, just emotionally processing what it is that they love. That's what journaling is. And it can be really fun and artistic as well. And you don't necessarily have to be a great artist. It's all about just placing things. You don't have to necessarily draw. And I also have from one of my students, here's one of their journal entries, and this is one of my favorite things that a kid has ever said. They were journaling about Chainsaw Man, and he was reflecting on the character Denji, and he said, what I like about Denji is that he acts goofy, but he really wants to be loved. I think that guys can't always express that. Chainsaw Man really shows what it's like to be a teenage guy. I feel like when I read Chainsaw Man, all my emotions come up. And this was quoted from a student with permission. And this is a student who never expressed those things to me verbally. And this was like this is a very in-depth, nuanced view of Chainsaw Man. And it is actually like a perfect understanding of the text, and showed me that he has really in-depth understanding of literacy, theme, all of these wonderful things. Like, this is a reader. This is a reader who understands characterization on a really high level. So, and this is a student that if I go to his English teacher, they think he's not a reader. So you get to see like a whole other side to them. And I went to his English teacher and I'm like, look at what he wrote. And it was wonderful. So.
Okay, this kind of statement on the left, I think is like a driving force of Ashley and our programs. There's magic for our students in hanging out in spaces where they can be their full selves, because that doesn't always happen in the classroom, right? Which makes what we do as librarians so incredibly powerful. These are just some examples. Again, I have put everything on one page just to kind of, to be intense on purpose. We know there's so many amazing connections with manga. I'm going to start right at the top. This time I'll go linearly. There's a treasure trove of connections to celebrate, from art, language, food, history, cosplay, culture, calligraphy, travel. That's student artwork that I have there at the top. One of my favorite characters, Sun Eater from My Hero Academia. No one in the school knew the student was an artist until they did this. Sometimes a love can be so deep for something, it allows them to shine in ways that they might not have been comfortable shining. And I think really that's like the magic of manga and anime. That top right picture, I was doing like a circulation lesson, and we were talking about kind of all things Japan, and I had some Kit Kat from Japan, and we did some simple calligraphy, some kanji, and there was so much interest. I created a club for it, and I did a donor shoes grant to get supplies, and I found like this really like strange time in the day with our school, and I'm going to talk about timing in a minute, and that's when we did our Japanese calligraphy club, and it was awesome. Puzzles, I'll talk about puzzles a little bit. We have a My Hero Academia puzzle, and then on the left-hand side, there's a student holding up a Jujutsu Kaisen puzzle. Angie Manfredi had such great advice about Five Below. So puzzles can be expensive, and you're buying anime puzzles on Amazon or wherever you're trying to find them, it can add up. Because let's be honest, we know a lot of times we're buying things ourselves. Five Below is an amazing place to get anime puzzles. I've gotten Demon Slayer cards there, multiple puzzles, including that Jujutsu Kaisen puzzle. A shout out for Jujutsu Kaisen. For my high school librarians, I know you can't see it. I'll stand up. I'm wearing a Getto shirt today from the Jujutsu Kaisen, and this ties into my next point, which is anime. Please don't look down on anime, right? Anime is meaningfully tied to literacy and will sell both your library program and you in incredibly powerful ways. If Ashley's the manga librarian, I'm the anime librarian. I watch more anime than I read manga. So I'm like some of your students, but that was also the opening into manga for me. And of course, when students we are watching anime in sub, like in the original Japanese with English or Spanish subtitles on the bottom, we are reading, right? It is literally a literacy rich activity. And we have to get really creative with clubs. We learned some like wonderful things during remote schooling, and I want to keep some of what we learned, like the beauty of doing asynchronous clubs or remote clubs. I think as long as your students still have access, if your district is still supplying students with devices and connectivity, then remote clubs can be a really kind of equalizing way for all students to be able to participate. Of course, there's lunchtime clubs. I think lunchtime anime clubs are the most like low floor, high ceiling activity. It's very simple to run. And because watching anime is such this joyous shared activity, doing it while you're eating can be really powerful. Before school, after school, asynchronous, enrichment time, electives. But we always have to remember and think, okay, who can participate? Right? We as librarians, as school librarians, we are in the business of removing barriers, not creating them. So we can't have an after school club if it requires students to provide their own transportation. Right? We can't have a before club if that's the case. So we want to make sure that every club we're creating, all students have access to it. And sometimes that can be really tricky. So for the past 8 years, I've been at an alternative school, and our day was fairly structured. Our students' days were fairly structured. So I had to get really creative. A lot of students were interested in 3D printing. And so I built like an asynchronous club. So they had a slide deck they could work through. I still tried to make it feel club-like because I called it a club, 3D printing club, but students could, sometimes I was doing it with a small group, sometimes I was doing it one-on-one, sometimes I was doing it with the whole class, and they would move through different elements. And then once they got familiar with Tinkercad, then they would start printing their own things. You might wonder why I'm talking about this when we're talking about manga and anime. And it's because most of the things that we print have to do with manga and anime. A lot of students love to create characters or print characters that they found. This is a coin from Demon Slayer, which is probably my favorite thing to print because it takes under an hour and it's printed on both sides. And when you do it with metallic filament. It's really beautiful. So that's why I have that picture there. Even just wearing clothing that connects to your favorite manga or anime, or your students' favorite manga and anime, can be a way to form connections with students. I am looking at my notes really quick to make sure there's nothing else I wanted to say on this slide. I know we're almost to the end of time. Oh, I did want to talk about this really quickly since we're talking about anime clubs so much. If you can't stream in your district, which I wasn't able to last year, you can absolutely still have an anime club, right? You can do fun quizzes, you can have robust discussions, you can do art, you can watch YouTube top 10 videos about anime and vote on favorites. There's still so many things you can do. So if you are limited in what you can stream, if something is blocked in your district, you can absolutely still have an anime club. Okay, I think I'm done. I think I'm done with that slide. Okay. Do you want me to go first since I'm already talking?
Sure.
No, I think you should go. You go, Ashley.
Okay. All right. Well, we have our resources. I did drop the link to our Wakelet into the chat, but it's also at bit.ly/manga programming. It has, we have a list of, and we work together on the list, by the way. It's of anime that is really good for like new entrants, and they're all movies. So they're like one and dones. Maybe we should also put on anime that maybe we should make another list too. I don't know, of just anime that is good for like good entry anime. But anyway, sorry.
I have a list of those on Manga in the Middle. So,
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So we also have our blogs. So Manga in the Middle is on there. There's also, I dropped, Julie actually had a really great article in Guide to Graphic Novels in Libraries book list about anime clubs. It's down there. This is completely available without having to log in to book list. There's just a ton of different resources that are on there for you to use. There's also a title list that I put together that has socio-emotional connections that I did for another presentation recently that tells you the grade bands and also like a bit about the content connections you can make with the titles. So I thought that was a good list to drop in, but you can find more lists on my website. Julie has a lot of really excellent reviews on her site. We have a ton of different resources that are available for you. And we're writing a book, if you didn't see it in Sarah's presentation. Do you want to talk about that?
that's good. I'm trying to go up in the chat and making sure that we've answered or anything. Let's see, we have a question. Let me look real quick.
Yeah, but yeah,
we're
we're
your
writing
interest survey for students. Sure, just email me and I'll share it with you. Great question, because it's not super long because we know we want students to fill it out. I didn't want to make it super long, but of the probably 12 questions on it, only 1 or 2 directly connect to reading or books. So it like sets the stage. I am interested in you no matter what your past experience with reading is. You are going to be important in this library program.
Well, I'm gonna tell you something. I went right on Five Below and placed my order while you all were talking. I found a lot of stuff in my area. I used my zip code, and there's a lot of stuff that's available. This was a wealth of information, and I am so excited that you all have this book coming out really soon. So please let me know when it's coming out so I can push it out on my pages to promote it, because you have a book coming out. Amanda Jones has a book coming out, and I'm pretty certain there's some other folks that were in our sessions today and over the last couple of days have books coming out too. I'm excited about this. So ladies, thank you so much. Julie, Ashley, give them some love in the chat. Make sure you go on social media, give them some love. Try your best not to publish any pictures that may have images of their students. I think you all did keep them all out, but but just be sensitive about what you are publishing online image wise, because they're working with populations where, you know, of course, parents might say something. So thank you so much, ladies. Appreciate you both.